All right then, it's 9 a.m. already, so we'll officially begin the tutorial now. So hello, good morning to all of you. My name is Mahe, and I am a software engineer at Anaconda. I live in Berlin, and this is my first time being in the States, my first PyCon US, and I am very happy to be here with all of you. And I want to thank you for joining us today for this tutorial, which is titled Publishing Your Python Package the Condo Way. And I am very excited to co-present this with my colleagues, Bianca, Dave, and Valerio. We also have Yanis, Ken, and Steve at the back, who were kind enough to offer their help and support during the tutorial. I will briefly go through the structure of the tutorial. So we will start with an overview of some basic packaging concepts. Some of you might already be familiar with them, but I think it's important to lay out some background before we get to the actual hands-on, and it's also important to ensure that everyone is on the same page. The overview will be presented by myself and Bianca. Then we'll move on to the hands-on, which will involve Valerio taking you through the process of writing a Python package from scratch, building it with Condo build, and publishing it on Condo. Then we'll have Dave talking about Condo governance, the Condo COC, and more. This will then be followed by a Q&A session where you can ask us questions about the tutorial, about Condo, Anaconda, and more. And there will be breaks throughout the session because, we all need our 4 cups of coffee in the morning. All right, so let us begin from the beginning. What is even a software package? A software package is a piece of software that someone wrote and published for other people to install and use. Now, to ensure that this piece of software that this guy wrote works on other people's machine, the software needs to go through the process of packaging. The process of packaging involves taking into account dependencies and OS requirements to make sure that the software works on each individual's machine. Now, you may install different kinds of packages on your machine, but sometimes they will not work out so nicely with each other. And it gets difficult to take care of all these dependencies and OS requirements. This is where Conda comes in. Conda is a package manager. It's open source, and it runs on Windows, Linux, and macOS. Conda is language agnostic, which means you can package softwares written in any language using Conda and not just Python. Conda is also an environment manager, which means it lets users create, load, and switch between different environments. A Conda environment can contain specific interpreters and libraries that are separate from other environments, and that are then separate from the libraries installed at system level. The benefit of Conda being a package manager as well as an environment manager is that it does all the tedious and difficult work of making sure that different packages work well together on your system. By the way, Conda is not the same as Anaconda. Anaconda is a Python and R data science distribution that contains Conda along with more than 250 packages. Mini-Conda is a bootstrap version of Anaconda that contains just Conda and Python, and the packages that these two depend on. All right, so now you know what a package is, what packaging is, what is package management, you know Conda, Anaconda, and Mini-Conda. The question is, where do I put my package for the world to see? Well, the answer is channels, but I am done speaking for now. Now Bianca will come over and talk about channels and more. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bianca Henderson. I'm a software developer at Anaconda. Channels. Depending on the packaging technology that you're using, the online location where these packages are made available will receive a different name. So typically, users will know about hosting packages on PyPI. In the Condo world, however, packages are hosted on channels. Channels are like warehouses for packages. The default Anaconda channel for Conda packages is the default channel. A Conda package creator can also create an Anaconda cloud account in order to host packages on their own channels. So in addition to the default channel, there are several community-owned channels such as conda-forge and bioconda. The most wide-reaching community-maintained channel is conda-forge because it hosts many packages over, I think at current count it's over 21,000. Common standards are enforced to ensure that all packages have compatible versions, and many of the packages are kept up to date by multiple maintainers. In Python packaging, Specifically, there are certain files which contain the project metadata that are required in order for the application to be packaged properly. You may have heard of the setup.py and setup.cfg files, which used to be the standard for distributing Python modules. They're artifacts of the setup tools module, which is designed to help with the packaging process. The more current way to package Python applications is via the use of a pyproject.toml file, which was introduced in PEP 518 in 2016 as a way of separating configuration of the build system from setup tools and also enabling setup tools to install itself without it needing to be installed before the packaging process. All right. Packaging something specifically for a Conda channel requires something called a recipe. Each recipe minimally contains a meta.yaml file, which contains metadata such as the package name and version, its dependencies, and how to build it. Recipes also require a build script in the form of either a build.sh file for Unix systems or build.bat for Windows. Alternatively, Conda build will look for the build script inline inside of the meta.yaml file. When you submit a recipe to the staged recipes repo on conda-forge, it is reviewed by the conda-forge community members. Once approved, an automated conda-forge process then generates the package based on the recipe, and then something called a feedstock becomes available on conda-forge. The word feedstock typically refers to the mixture of raw materials used for industrial processes or blacksmithing, which is why conda-forge adopted this term. It's kind of a cool backstory there. Writing recipes manually can be very time-consuming and tedious. So this is where Grayskull comes in. Grayskull automatically generates Conda recipes for PyPI packages, GitHub repos, or crayon packages. Setup.py and pyproject.toml were mentioned earlier. Grayskull takes the metadata provided by those files and generates a recipe using that information. This recipe can then be used to build a Conda package. So now that we have the knowledge about how the process works, we'll start this tutorial and hand over the mic to Valerio. Before we start, any questions on any of the topics that we covered? Or no? Okay, we can just start.
Nice.
Yep,
okay,
there's the
this
link.
should be working.
Yep.
I think at this point I would need to attach my HDMI cable. Nice. So for this part, I will try to do an hands-on with you. Just move a little bit so I can see all of you here. In case you have any question, feel free to interrupt me at any time. It's very fine to have questions during the hands-on, and we would love to have as much interaction as we can get during the whole tutorial. So I think that the idea of the project we decided to come up with was to create a project which we called a DAD roller. I think it's the idea is to make an application that would make, I don't know, make you able to roll some die for Dungeons and Dragons games. I don't know how many Dungeons and Dragons player we have in this room. Oh, okay. Not that many. Well, anyway, so luckily, I actually brought my dice, so you can physically see them, sort of. So we do have, in Dungeons & Dragons, you do need to have 7 dice, different. So you have different faces for the dice. You're very welcome to see them later if you want. And essentially, these dice are particular because you need them for different things. And you have the classic six-sided dice, but you also have the 4 dice, so D4, then you have D10, D8, D12, D20, and D100. So essentially, you need all of them to play, and you only have these particular dice. So from a perspective of a software, we need this application to handle this specific set of dice. And we also had an extra requirement, which is, since this is going to work in the terminal, we might want to have numbers printed in emojis, so Unicode characters. Last but not least, we also have this project to make a report, because sometimes when you play D&D, what you have to do is to roll many times multiple dice, and so you have to, have an overview, a tabular overview of everything has happened with your rolling. So these are the 2 main requirements we want to develop together. All right. So, and the first and foremost thing we want to do is to create a repository, because we will be working as this is a real project we want to pack and to deliver and distribute to everyone. So the first thing we do is to go on GitHub, and I hope everybody here has a GitHub account, and you can create a repository which presumably will be named D&D Roller. I assume it will be named this way. You can name it as you like, and I can do that with you now. Is everything okay? Yeah, okay, sure. So, just to be crystal clear, do you have the document open in front of you? The HackMD document? If you need the link, no worries, we can send you. Or I think that has been sent around, so you should probably have an email with all the links and references. But please, if that's not the case, please let us know. It's very, very fine. Okay, we're here to help. And again, we hope we could make this as interactive as possible. Nice. So, oh, by the way, my plan for this hands-on is to work on. So you'll be seeing the browser. So I'll scroll down the document on this side, and probably what I can do is to hide this one because I don't need, and then grab some space. I want this way. Then I have an editor. I will be using Visual Studio Code, but you can do any editor you like. It's very much the same. And I will also be using a command line shell. So, and at this point, if the font size won't be bigger enough in the back, you will tell me no, you let me know, and I'll properly manage. Okay, so what I want to do now is to go and create this repository. We'll be moving this window on this side. So I'll go on GitHub on my username page, and I will be clicking on plus, new repository. If you're not familiar with this, please let me know. I will be slowing down. But essentially, I set up the name, D&D Roller. I'll put some description. I think the description could be something like simple Python app, as it's here. Simple Python app to roll dice for D&D. Now the important bit, we should select the visibility of the project. It's going to be public. We want to initialize the repository with README file. That's generally a good practice. And also, it's very important when you create that, although you can do that later, but generally you should have an idea when you create a project, what is the license you want to pick for your distribution. We're going to select MIT license, because it's the most open source license you can have. So you can essentially reuse everything, no problem. And the git ignore that could come handy is to have a Python template. So essentially what GitHub is going to do with this is going to create a .gitignore file for our own repository with the list of the most common ignored resources of files when you have a Python project. Nice. We click on Create Repository, and we're good to go. So at this point, you should have something similar to this. If not, please let me know. And what we need now is to make a clone of this repository. So I'm going to copy the URL, clicking on code, and I'm going to move it on something in a folder that I want. I don't know, let's say, let's make Condo tutorial. And then git clone, is the font of this shell big enough? Larger? Better? Nice. Thank you. Okay. So what this is doing is creating a new folder, which is going to be called D&D Roller as the repository, because I didn't specify differently. And cloning. Nice. So at this point, oopsie. At this point, I don't see anything. Yeah. We should have a D&D Roller folder. And yeah, I'm using Zish in this particular case as a shell. And so with a bit of gimmicks, so there's some plugins in the shell that tells me that it's a GitHub repository. I'm the main branch, and the base is my default Conda Python environment I'm using currently. So, sure, definitely. No. Please feel free to interrupt me at any time. It's very, very fine. And this also is for you. So I just need from you a bit of feedback along as much as we go through the things, because I don't know how familiar with things, and it's very fine if you don't know things. I'm actually here to tell you what I know. So this doesn't necessarily guarantee that I know the answer, but I might try. Anyway, so I think we've done this already. So we did the repository, we created a folder. I call it PyConda tutorial. I call it differently, it doesn't really matter. And we clone the repository. So we're done at this point here. Okay? Yes, sorry. We were thinking that this is the general case. It doesn't have to be. If you want to have a different setup, essentially you can have a local package. We can touch that, but that's a very good point actually. This will be relevant when we get to creating the package. So far we're actually doing a standard Python development. So what the plan for this step before the break, I guess, is we get to develop this package from scratch. And hopefully this project would be entertaining for you enough to make it fun. But it's like we're building what it's going to be the target of our packaging in the second part. All right? And this package, this project being the D&D roller we've been talking about. So at this point, I would move myself to using, I can close this one. Well, I leave it there. I will be moving on to the editor, and I will open this folder, or maybe I do the smart way, which is opening directly from terminal. So like code / it should open a new window of Visual Studio Code. I can close this one, and at this point, I may make it bigger. Is this big enough in the back? We have an empty folder so far, and we have exactly what is it in the repository. We have a README, which is also empty right now. Well, it's not empty. It's actually GitHub is automatically taking this metadata from the new repository page. We have a license, which is an MIT license. We have the git ignore we specified, which is, as I told you before, it's a list of folders that will be automatically ignored from Git and GitHub repository. Nice. So now we have to create our own actual package. So we can create a new folder. In the instructions here, you see the commands to do that in the shell. So I will be doing the same. You can do as many in the way you prefer. I am the folder, so I will be making a new D&D _roller folder. And then I create a new folder called tests. And this is how now the structure of the project looks like. Let me show you in the shell here. Sorry, ls. So this is, let me do this properly. I'm going to do this in vertical so you can read it better. ls -1. Nice. So this is starting to be the classical project structure when you're creating a Python project. So you have the D&D roller, which is where we're going to presumably put the code, the Python code, and tests, where we're going to presumably put the test code still in Python code. And the rest of it is essentially what you're going to see here. Okay? So, any question so far? Everything fine? Boring? Yes? No? Nice. Nice. The first thing we do is to create our own, our first module, dice.py module, and this will go within the dnd_roller. So it's the first file of our own package. So within the dnd roller, we create a new file. It's called dice.py. There you go. Now we can close this one. Okay. In case you're using, I just remembered that I skipped creating the environment, the Condo environment. I don't know if you have done this already, but we can do that together now. So in the beginning, on top here, in the preparation step, you should have created a Conda environment, which is the environment we'll be using during the hands-on, so that we work on an environment which is specifically created for the hands-on, and also is very useful because you're not polluting whatever environment you have on your computer. So it's going to be the sandbox of our own project, our own work. Do you have created the packaging environment as per instructions? Okay. If not, you can do that with me. Yes, please. Sorry, I didn't get that. Sure. Is that better? I can go even further than that. Okay. So, again, in the terminal window, I'm going to clear here so I have a better view myself. So what we do here is Condo. We do the classic command line instructions of creating a new Conda environment. So we do Conda create -n, which is the name of the environment we want to create. We call it packaging. And then we say -y because we don't want to hit down yes in confirmation. We assume everything is fine. Then we have Python 3.10 installed and Pytest. These are the only two packages we're going to install there. All right? So we run it. And you should be seeing something like that. Executing on your own. When this is done, we should have a new packaging environment ready to be activated. So the last step is to activate our new packaging environment. So we do Conda, activate. I would probably do this now. Probably shrink the window a little bit so my last line in the terminal is going to end up in the middle of the screen. And still it's very difficult for me. Okay, nice. Let's do this. Okay. Packaging. So now, if you're using Zish, you might probably seeing that I am on the packaging Condo environment. If not, it's essentially you can test. I don't know how to do that on Windows though, if you're on Windows. But if you're on a Linux/Unix machine, you can actually check which Python you're using, and essentially points you to the path of the Python command in your shell, and that should be something like that. So Anaconda installation folder or miniconda installation folder /ems/name of the environment /bin/python. That's the path. And essentially, this is telling you you're using the Python interpreter of the environment called packaging. Okay, so everything we'll be doing now, from now on, in this session of the terminal, will be within the packaging environment. That sounds good? Is that okay for you so far, or is like to common knowledge? You know this already? Okay, good. As soon as there's anyone interested here, I'm very happy to explain things. There's no problem at all. So just to make crystal clear what's going on, we're creating a Condo environment so that everything, so imagine that you have your own Python interpreter on your computer. And now we are, and this could be available via an interpreter. We suggested to install Miniconda because Miniconda, as Mahe and Bianca said already in the first part, you can have Python and Conda all together. So you have Conda now on your computer, a command you can run. And afterwards, within this environment, we're creating a subspace where we're going to install all the packages we need without interfering with the rest of the installations. So, and you can have a list of as many environments as you like on your computer. In case you're wondering and you want to check what are the environments on your computer, you can run a conda info minus envs, and this gives you the list of all the environments you have. In this particular case, I have this list, and the star indicates the one that you're currently using. This is another way to check, by the way. This is probably a platform-independent way to check using directly Conda to check what is the environment you're currently using. Okay? And in fact, I'm using packaging. So whichever package I'm going to install from now on in this terminal session is not going to interfere with any other environment here. So I'm pretty sure I'm installing everything there, and any other package that is not in that environment will not be accessible or available. Okay? So we are now going to work on the dice module. Let me go back to the code. Well, the first thing is we need a function to roll a dice. Okay? And probably the main and only requirement of this function is that we just have a limited set of dice we can choose. So it could be one of the 7 allowed in D&D. So it could be a D4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 100. There's actually a catch in this if you're not familiar with D&D. So the D100, this is 100, is essentially a probability die, which means that you get numbers in decimals. So like you have 10, 20, 30, 40, up to 100. You don't have numbers in the middle. And so that's the little catch we want to implement in the function. So it means that you roll a d10 and you multiply by 10. This is the 100 that you need. Okay? So let's write down now the roll function, which is the main building block of everything we're going to do from now on. Okay, this is the pretty simple requirement I was expecting. So you have a function roll, you pass a parameter d, which is the number of the number of sides of the dice you want, of the die you want, and then you return a number in 1 for included, right? So if you're using, at least when I wrote this one, I was assuming that using square brackets means the interval with the 2 ends included, as in the mathematical notation. If you have a call like roll d equal 10, you return a number in 1 and 10, both included. D5, you have an exception because D5 doesn't exist in D&D, and the catch about the D100 is essentially roll D10 multiplied by 10, as I told you already. So far, so good? So let's write it down. The implementation is going to be quite straightforward. So I'm going to copy now and then comment over the code, if that's okay with you. I'm going to copy and paste. I'm not expecting you to do differently. You're very welcome to copy and paste as well. The point at this point in this tutorial is not to write Python. It's just like to have something to work with. So it's very fine. What this function is actually doing is we have a tuple of supported dice here. We have a function, roll, parameter d of type expected of type int, returning an integer. We have random.randint to generate the random numbers. And we rely on that. Probably the only thing to mention here, if you're interested in this particular flavors of Python programming, is instead of checking, so we have to make sure that d is an integer. So instead of actually checking that d is directly, if d is an integer, we assume d is an integer, or we try to cast it. And then if that's not going to work, an exception will be raised. And so we handle the error accordingly. Otherwise, everything works. This particular pattern of programming is called EAFP, easier ask for permission than forgiveness. So it's a way to program idiomatic Python. The alternative would have been if clauses, but in the Pythonic solution, or idiomatic Python if you want, better to ask for permission than forgiveness is a better approach. So you're essentially forced to cast to an integer if for any reason this is not going to work, because, for example, it's a string, which is a alphabetical string, not a number, a numerical string, which is going to work, by the way. It raises it raises an exception. Okay. And if everything works at this point, so if we reach the else branch, which happens when nothing is, no exception is raised during the try block, again we check that d is in the supported dice. If it's not, we raise a value error. And if it's not, so everything is fine, we use randint. And unless we have d100, if that's the case, we change the way in which we call essentially we make a recursive call on d10 times 10. Does that make sense? So, assuming this is pretty much it and quite straightforward for you, and the few comments I made already, before moving on to the second bit, which is normally what you would normally do when you develop that, is, okay, I'm done with the code, I need some tests to make sure that the implementation is actually doing what I'm expecting. It does. And so we're moving on to testing. To make this a proper Python package, we should be creating another file within the dnd_roller folder, which is called dunder init. I'm going to tell you exactly what dunder is in a minute. Just for now, assume that we're using double underscore init. Is that big enough again? Double underscore init double underscore again .py. So the double underscore in Python terminology is generally referred to as dunder, as a short for double underscore. And the dunder init file is what is actually making the dnd_roller folder a Python package. And just to clarify a little bit of clashing in terminology at this point, we're calling package, we're using package to refer to two different things. So the dnd_roller is a Python package. The whole project we're going to build in the end is a Python package as well, but actually it's a package. Let's call it package, not Python package. So to make distinction between the Python package from the perspective of the name resolution and the namespace of your programming, and the software package you're building and distributing on the repository to be installed. Okay, so let's call it Python package, this one, and software package, the ultimate target of this hands-on. Okay. So the the init, the dunder init file is particularly useful in a package because it essentially defines the public API of your package. So whatever is, and I'm very happy to explain how that works in case you're interested later on, or maybe during the break, or you have any question later on. But let's assume for now you're familiar with how this works. And believe me when I tell you that the dunder init file is essentially making the public API of your package. So whichever name we're writing and we're defining into the init file is going to be the public API of the package as well from the import perspective. So for example, if we do something like from.dice import role, we're essentially making the role function available in the dice module if a public function of the D&D roller package, Python package, with just this line. Okay? And if you don't believe me, as you should, because it's always good to test it, what we can do is to run a Python interpreter. And so, interactively, if we run Python, okay, and going slow down because I'm really improvising at this point, what we can do is we can import. So we know that the roll function is in the dice module here, within the D&D roller package, okay? So for sure, we can do from D&D underscore roller dot dice import roll. Is that clear? Good. And this should be working. It does work. But with this instruction here, in the dunder init file, what also works is from D&D underscore roller import roll directly without using the .dice module. There you go. So we promoted the roll function as an important function for the package because we want this to be imported by our own users using the D&D roller Python package. So from a programmatic perspective, what you're doing is telling within the many, many functions you have in your package, these are the important ones. The other ones, if you want to use them, you have to import them following the full path within the Python package. Does that make sense? Okay, brilliant. So now on to the second bit, which is testing. We need to test the code before making sure that everything, before moving on to developing another feature. We might be creating a new file here, which is called pytest.ini, is the configuration file Pytest needs to have name resolution. So we just move on and create a new file. I'm going to use the editor directly. You can use the command line of the editor as well. It's very fine. And this has to be created in the main root folder. So here, not this level, I think the other one. I will be moving later. It's not working with me, pytest.ini. And this should live into the main root folder. There you go. This contains just a Pytest directive, and the pytest.ini is, if you're not familiar with Pytest, is a configuration file where you put some configurations, and I think there is a link in the document of where to find a specific configuration for Pytest. In general, here is the link, by the way. It's in the comment of the code. Essentially, this configurations are sometimes used for reporting or to specify extra dependencies, or if you want to visualize, you want to set up some, I don't know, some logging with your tests, things like this. Okay, now we're done with this, and we can move on creating a new testing module. It's standard practice to create a module, a testing module for a specific function or a specific module. It really depends on the granularity of the test you want. At this point, we're developing one function at a time, so presumably we want to develop a module for a single function at a time. And so we're going to create a new file here, which is called, within the tests folder, which is called test_roll.py. Okay. Again, I'm going to do as I did before. So I'm going to copy everything here, and then I make comments on the different testing. How many of you here are familiar with Pytest and how that works? Fantastic. So Pytest is the testing package we're using, and and just for your information, the standard library, in the many things already containing, there's also a unit test package doing sort of the same thing. So when you say Python is a battery included language, is because the standard library has essentially everything. And just a shameful plug for the talk I'm going to do tomorrow. It's somewhat related because I will be talking about some of the gems you have in the standard library, but also it's everything I will be doing and showcasing is done essentially just using standard library, no extra dependency package. This is just to let you know that the standard library is an amazing piece of software we have with Python directly. So it's not just the language, it's also all the extra bits the Python package is bringing with it. Pytest is actually, and unit test is a testing, is historically following the tradition of being the standard testing package for every language. JUnit for Java was the most popular one, and unit test is resembling sort of that structure. Pytest is like a more Pythonic testing package, and also helps you to make things very easily. So as the default configuration, this is, for example, another thing you can configure in your pytest.ini. The standard configuration for Pytest is whichever function is going to start with test underscore, Pytest is going to think that's a testing function automatically for you. If you want a different naming, you can set it up. But this is not going to be the point nor the case. And in addition to that, just by the way, if you're using Visual Studio Code as I'm doing, this is complaining because it says, Pytest is not in your environment. What's going on? I cannot import this package. And this is because I haven't set up my editor with the right environment. So for this particular case, as you can see, I hope you can see, but is pointing to a Python which is not within the packaging environment. So I'm going to switch interpreter, choosing for packaging. If it's not, we should, there you go. A bit of refresh always helps. Now I switch to this one, and in a matter of a second, now Pytest is not an error anymore because it can resolve the name. Because if you remember, we just installed Python 3.10 and Pytest, nothing else. We actually have been installing extra things that we didn't specify explicitly, but those were dependencies of the previous two packages, nothing more. So we just have an environment with anything we need to just run Python and Pytest, nothing more. And this is what we need so far, so so far so good. Yes, so the function we've been testing is roll. And since it's a function that essentially gets an integer, we have to make sure that, and also just is restricted to specific integer values like D, 4, 6, 7, 8, and whatever. The first test is make sure that the actual function returns a valid number. So this is the test in which, okay, everything works. No black magic. And the only automation Pytest is providing here, for those of you not familiar, is like instead of writing every single test or every function call with all the possible values, in this case, with the sides of the dice supported, Pytest is making a parameterized test. So we say, call this function with all the supported dice we have here from supported dice. So it's going to make out of this function automatically one test for each value we want. And so it's essentially the same test, changes only the input of the test. Then we test roll D100 because it's the specific case. And so in particular, we just test that the number is within the range, but also is a module 10 is equal to 0, which means is a number is a power of 10. Is a multiple of 10, sorry. We test the conditions, so to generating errors, something like string which are not numbers. We're testing, oh, by the way, this is another thing that's probably useful for you.
So Valerio warned us that we need to take breaks.
Oh, yeah.
And he never thinks of that.
No.
So
you have to shoot me. And in this country could be a problem. No, please don't.
yes,
No.
it could be.
Sorry.
So in the spirit of whatever we're doing, taking early or taking frequent short breaks. Let's take a 10-minute break. Let's be back here at 10 o'clock. Okay? If you have questions, now's a great time to ask.
Yeah, I'm here for you.
Thanks, Valerio.
No, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I warned you. Okay, I'm back. Nice. Good. Where was I? Yeah, no, I was going through the test. I think there's nothing particularly interesting to say here, but maybe highlights how you can test for positive case and negative case, in particular for the cases when you're expecting exceptions in your code. You're essentially testing that the code is indeed raising the exception you're expecting. And in this case, Pytest offers you a context manager called raises. So essentially, you wrap the function call within the context manager offered by Pytest, and if the exception is being raised, the accession essentially passes, so the test passes. Otherwise, it fails because it doesn't raise the exception we're expecting. Well, probably the last and perhaps the most important thing to tell you, apart from the specific case, as a takeaway message, as a person. Oh, something I wanted to do here is like getting rid of this because it's making me headaches. Okay, so I can see everybody here. Is whenever you're dealing with test code, my general advice is test functions are not going to be production function. And by that, I mean this test function won't be called by other functions, but Pytest itself for testing purposes. And so whenever you're naming testing function, please make sure that they're actually giving you an immediate message, as in what this test is about. So, and they can be as long as you want. It doesn't really matter. To me, in my personal experience, the clear and the easy to remember, and even for your future self, those names are, the better. Something like test roll with unsupported dice will raise exception. You immediately know what this test is doing. Or test roll with negative or float, no will raise exception, will not actually raise exception. Or float, no stands for number, sorry. Negative or float number will raise exception, something like that. Nice. So at this point, I think we just need to run Pytest to make sure that everything works. To do that, I'm going to run this command, which is Python -m Pytest. Python -m is essentially importing the Pytest module, and then -v is the option for Pytest to have verbose output. So we run this. We have, in this particular case, we have lots of passes, and you might notice this or not, but essentially the number of passes you have in the output is way more than the number of test functions you've actually developed. And this is thanks to the parameterized test I was explaining before. So Pytest is automatically generating new test functions with different input here. So we have the test roll die return a valid number with an input of 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 20. And Pytest has done all this job for us. So we have all green. We can move on. Any questions so far? Okay. I will be going a little bit quicker on this part, just because we're sort of building what we want to, so it's not the main attention here. I guess the last requirement we have is that we really want to have this roll function to be fancy in the terminal, because we want to print numbers using emoji. We do not reinvent the wheel. Luckily, somebody has already developed a package which is called Nomoji, as in emoji number. And this package does exactly what we want. I'm very happy to show you the code later on. It's really, really silly. Just to clarify, the process I went through to make this package available is exactly what we're doing right now. So I essentially did the very same thing, but with a different project called Nomoji. And now this package is, to my shame, available on PyPy and on my own channel on Conda. So you can install this package using my own channel. And this is just an excuse, really, to let you know that something I was discussing in the break with one of you, is you can indeed have public channels for yourself, for your own publishing, for your own package on anaconda.org. At the end of the tutorial, Dave will guide you through the process of how conda-forge works, because conda-forge is the big repository available for anyone with lots of different packages. And as you might guess, because the importance of this conda-forge is for the community, you might expect that this conda-forge is not hosting every single package everybody's going to submit. So there is a review process for that. And Dave will tell you later about it. But in the meantime, you can have on anaconda.org your own channel, and that is yours. So you can use that to upload any package you want. Incidentally, I realized that my own package was dated back to 2016, for some reason. And I wasn't an anacondiac at the time. And Valerio is my username, so I'm going to use that. Just to show you what I was showing earlier. So if you go to anaconda.org/your username, this is the page of your channel. And you see Nomoji has been updated and uploaded to my channels here. All the packages are just like here. They're very quite old ones, actually, so don't count them. But this is an official channel, and as soon as you have a channel, you can install from it using Conda. The way in which you specific a different or particular channel for your installation is using the -c option in the command line. So if you do conda install -c, the name of the channel, in this case, Valerio Maggio is my username, and the name of the package you want to install, you get it. Okay? So this is what I'm going to do. And you should do the same. Conda install -c, Valerio Maggio, Nomoji. It's installing a package. It tells you, you want to install this? Yes. There you go. So I installed a custom package from a specific channel now. Alternatively, you can install it directly from PyPy using pip. And this is also another excuse to let you know that within a Condo environment, you can install packages both from PyPy or from Condo channels. So Condo channels are the standard, the preferred ways, but if at any time any specific package is not available in any channel, not even conda-forge, which I hardly think is the case nowadays, but if that is the case, like Nomoji, for example, I promise you is not a conda-forge, it will never be, you can install it via pip. And another important feature to remind you of having environments in Conda is that you can mix Conda package and pip package within the same environment, and they will work seamlessly together. Yes? Good question. When you're creating a Condo environment, you're actually installing pip within the environment. And so you can install whichever version of pip you want, because pip is a package in the end. So yes, the answer is yes, you can do that. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I have this. No, when you create the package, I did the -y option before, so I didn't show you what it was telling me to install. But let's say I'm going to create a new package, a new environment here. Let's say, whoops, sorry, just give it a second. Yeah, this is a new one, it doesn't remember. Yeah. So create, conda create -n test emp, right? And I just want Python here. So he's doing his job and blah, blah, blah. Then it tells me what's going to be installed. And within this, there will be Python and setup tools. Okay? And also pip. So pip will be installed already. So when I do that, let me hit enter there. It's going to take a second because this packages will be presumably already downloaded. So you just have to install it. So this means that, by the way, whenever you're creating an environment, Conda is actually caching on your own computer the package it downloads. And whenever you're creating another environment, if those packages are already there on your computer, it is not going to be downloaded again, unless the version will be different, the platform will be different, all things. But if they're there, already there. And I'll also tell you a trick to remove this cache if you want to make some space out of it in a second. So if I conda activate test emp, sorry, let me clear the shell now so you can see. Conda activate test emp. And then I do which pip. It's within the test emp environment. Okay. Back to the trick I promised you. I deactivate the environment first. And so I'm using, again, this gimmick in Zish telling me the environment. If I deactivate it, I go back to base. And now I want to remove the environment. Conda remove -n, the name of the environment, test emp. Or -all, -yes. This is removing everything in the environment, but the package will still be there. So now the test emp doesn't exist anymore. And to double check that, you do again conda info -emps, and test emps is not in the list anymore. That's what we wanted, but the packages are still there. And so to do that, you do conda clean -all -yes. So now it's removing everything is locally installed. So from now on, whichever package I'm going to install will be downloaded again. It tells you also the number of packages and the space it's saving afterwards. Okay? Yes, please. Correct. You can probably specify the -n option there. I'm not entirely sure. You can probably try that and let me know. When you do conda clean, -n and the name of the environment you want to clean up. I presume that works. No, both. There is the mini conda cache and the packages installed and created within the environment as well. Yeah, both of them. Yeah, it's actually taking its time here. That's fine. I don't know what it's doing really. Okay. Where we are. I do have a. No, let's try that. Let's try this way. Switch window here. So now we do have no emoji installed, and we have to modify the code so that we can use this. Essentially, what this code is doing is adding a verbose option in the role function, so that it's fault by default, and when this happens, essentially we print using the emojize function, which is available in Nomoji. So the only modification you have to make to the previous code is just like, so going back to the role function, we have to add the input line, Nomoji, the parameter, verbose, type bool, default false, and if this happens, I just copy and paste here. It's really not worth it. We can print, and then we return So this has to go into a variable, and then adjusting tabulation, and that's it. So if we have verbose, we print game die, and then we roll it. So if we want to try it, we can move into a Python interpreter, and then we can do something like from D&D roller, import roll, and do roll a D4 with verbose equal true. And that's it. Does that make sense so far? All good? Nice. This is something I'm particularly curious about, actually, and because we had a bit of testing in the preparation of this tutorial, but I personally have no specific clue about it. Do you have any problem with emojis on your end? You do? Okay. And you're running on Windows?
No, this is a Mac. There's 3 characters, E, X, and then the emoji.
Okay, so if you can't see them, it probably means that your the font you're using in the shell is not supporting Unicode characters. So don't worry about it. It was just a silly, stupid thing to let you know about the channels and to let you know about the pip packages within Condo environment. Okay, it was just a stupid excuse for that. There's no extra reason about it. Thank you for telling me that. That's very useful for me. We are probably updating that with this particular disclaimer or warning. And the second is there are fonts that you can set up your shell with, specifically supporting Unicode characters. All right, let's give it a go again. Let's roll a D of what die you want me to roll now? 100. Let's go for 100. 70. Well, that's pretty good. Yeah. In D&D there's D20 especially, and sometimes you can hit 1 or 20, and that's the critical ones. So if that happens, generally is very good bit. So if you roll a D20, let's see what we got. 17. Yeah, could be good actually. Yeah, really good. I think that I had too much fun working with this stupid and silly project that it gave me the opportunity to include in the explanations of what's going on here a bit of these and that relating to also random number generations and how you test with random number generations. So I think this is generally particularly. Oh, I actually rolled 18 in my previous test, so that generally is a good bit. By the way, and Dave, who tested the part of a window, actually got critical here. You got 1. Where is Dave? That's actually pretty good. Very, very well, Dave. Well done. Okay, so the second step here to work on is dice roll, and dice roll is a simple function essentially generalizing the roll function with multiple times with a single die. So dice roll is really, really simple. Essentially, we specify how many times we want to roll a single die, and we call roll that number of times, and we report the list of numbers we got in the rolling. Okay. Remember that roll has the verbose parameter default, so whenever we call this roll within dice, we're making sure that verbose is going to be used, so we don't have any printout during the generation of the rollings here. So we go back to the dice.py file and we add this new function, dice roll. Okay, there's a bit of doc strings there. Rolls a single die with given sites and throws a number of times. Just to explain a little bit what's going on. If you're not familiar with this expression, this is called list comprehension in Python. So we're actually creating a list on the fly using this syntax. It's really no different from using a for loop explicitly and doing it, and accumulating the results into a list explicitly. Nice. So we have our dice roll function now. I think what we have left is to have some tests with it. The takeaway here is we can reuse the same strategy we use with roll by using, again, parameterize to generate a few test input. And by the way, the test inputs in testing terminology, in particular in Pytest terminology, they're called fixtures. And so I think this is what I'm going to do soon. I'm creating fixtures in Pytest. And then, the parameterize is going to be used with the same, so the strategy for testing is going to be the same. So we can specify a list of die we want to roll and a list of times we want to roll. So there will be the values for the two parameters, and we can parameterize them. And then I think the other excuse is of talking a bit about other things not specifically related to Conda building packages, is about mocks in tests. So for example, in this particular function, if you had to test it, you have to test two things, because you have to test that the function is actually doing what you're expecting. So is returning the numbers you wanted, and is raising the errors you're expecting. But also, you have to make sure that you don't have duplicate code. And so one of the things you want to test at some point is this function really calling roll function? Or is actually re-implementing the will and re-implementing the same piece of code which is already in roll? And so one way to do this in a unit testing fashion, and the unit testing function has just one rule. You have to test everything in isolation. You want to patch the roll function just for the purpose to make sure that you're actually testing that particular patch is being called. You don't really need to know that anything more than that, because the rest of it will be tested with normal testing, checking the output of the function dice roll. In this particular case, you're interested in understanding that the roll function has been called, and in particular, a certain number of times that function has been called. Okay, you can do that using mock object, and this doesn't require any extra packages installed. This is a standard library again, unit test.mock. You can import patch, and in our test function here, we're just patching the roll function with a mock object. And this mock object has particular features. One is that you can assert that this mock object has been called during the dice roll. So the dice roll function is being recorded. There's a check there that the roll function has been called. And you can also assert that the function has been called with a specific input. In particular, we say we want to roll a die of 4, and so we're expecting the roll function 1 to be called, and to be called with the parameter d equal to 4. This is what we're testing here. This is just a takeaway message for you, in case you've never been working with mock object before. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is creating a new testing module, which is written on the top of the snippets here, test-dice-roll.py. And again, the practice I'm using is creating a testing file for each of the function I'm testing. Test dice roll. And also the naming is important, because the name is reflecting the name of the function and the test. Nice. I add this within the test folder, and now when I run again Pytest is actually looking for the test folder by default and is gathering all the test function from all the modules you can find, and is running everything in a single battery. So again, Python -m, Pytest -v for the verbose. And now it's running everything. So you can see it's running test from test-dice-roll.py and from the test-roll.py we had before. 100% passed, we can move on. Another thing, in case you're not familiar with testing and unit testing has to run fast. So you And that's why you don't want to have dependencies, specifically mock object. So you're using mock object also, for example, to avoid communicating with the I/O, communicating with the databases, because you have unit tests to run fast on everything in isolation again. So no dependencies again. But I'm diverging here. So nice. So far so good. Okay, move on to the last bit. Any question? Good. So the last and but by no means least function we're developing is called sequence roles. And sequence roles is a function that essentially is expecting a pattern of dice rolls in a form of string, and you have to slightly have a bit of a logic here to pass the sequence in some way, and the sequence is specified here. In the pattern is done in this way essentially. I thought I'd written this pattern somewhere in the document. I'm just realizing is not where I needed. I think it was in the beginning on the very top. So sorry for scrolling up again in the document, but in the very, very beginning, when I was developing, yes, there you go. So in the very, very, very beginning, so at the beginning of the dice module section, I said that we need a function that would receive a sequence of dice rolls in this format. So you have 2d4, comma, 3d6, comma, 1d10, comma, 6d12, and will generate a tabular report of the outcomes. So in essence, this sequence roles function has to do two things: getting the string, parse the string, and then translates all of this sequence of roles into dice rolls invocations. Does that make sense? So this will mean that we need to call dice roll function with the thrown parameters of 2 and a d parameter of sides parameter of 4, and so on and so forth. So we want to roll 2 times a d4 die, and then 3 times a d4 d6, and so on and so forth. So going back to the sequence roles function, it's here. This is a sequence function. I'm just adding this extra function in the dice module, and here, so I go to the dice.py file. I just close this one, paste it. So the first thing this function does is to pass the input, and the way it does is, okay, I appreciate this might be convoluted and not immediately understandable, but again, there was a shameless plug for my talk tomorrow, so bear with me a little bit. So essentially what this is doing is like passing the string in input using a bit of a functional approach, as in functions calling other functions. If you're not entirely familiar with what's going on, essentially you have a map function, and this map function is calling the strip function from strings on every single element of the sequence.split, which is going to be a list. And then for each of those, we're essentially calling again. We're splitting on the d to get the number of the side of the dice of the we wanted, and then we're converting them as integer, and then we plug everything together and we call dice rolls. And by the way, this is also done within a dictionary expression, dictionary comprehension. So essentially, we're also creating a dictionary out of it on the spot. So in 3 lines of Python, we're essentially doing lots of things. It's very condensed, very convoluted. If you're interested and you want to know more a little bit about this flavors of programming in Python, I have a talk tomorrow. I'll be more than happy to let you more about it. And if you're scared by it, let me know. I will change my talk immediately. And I think that the last bit that remains here is the tabulation part, because we want to have a sequence of roles and then we want to print them automatically using a tabular report. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There is a package for you, and that's actually a package I discovered working on this project, which is generally available. It's called a tabulate, and is really, really useful to do exactly what we're doing. like creating tables and printing them in different formats. So what we're going to do now is to installing installing Tabulate in our environment from using Conda directly. We're not adding any channel here, which means we're using the default channel from Conda. So the Anaconda default channel. So we do, first off, we do conda install tabulate. And by the way, in the meantime, this is a good opportunity for me to remind you that when I'm installing external packages for this particular project development, these packages will become the dependencies we need when we have to package. In other words, so imagine that someone wants to use your software, in this particular case, this stupid D&D roller. If you want to run that code, you need to have no-emoji installed on your, in your environment and Tabulate now in your environment. So given this piece of information, you have to remember that these two packages will become the dependency of our project, of our soon-to-be package, software package. Okay? So takeaway message, we're going to use no-emoji and Tabulate as the dependencies of the software we're going to pack into Conda package. Okay? So that's done. And I guess that the rest of the code here is like adding Tabulate here and making it working. So let me do that super quickly. I go back in the dice.py file. I add the Tabulate dependency. There's a Tabulate file. I also define the header for the table I want to create. So we have a first column, which is dice, the second rolls, the third sum. And that's header. I've also added this screwed up there. It's okay. And the last bit is adding the verbose parameter. This time is true by default because sequence source really wants to have tabulation. I type bool equals to true. And sorry. And that's the code we need to copy. There you go. So this code, let me show you properly, is actually using Tabulate. So we have our dictionary of roles in sequence. This dictionary is essentially indexed on the sides of the roles. So we have D4 and other dice. Actually, I realize now that that's not a very good idea. Oh no, sorry. Roles is what you get from the input, so that should be fine. Well, if you have clashing, the software is not handling the clashing properly. So I'm just realizing that. So that was not a smart idea. We should probably fix that later, or maybe we should add a test to it. To see that this won't be working as expected. But anyway, we're using tabulate function, passing on the table, the headers, and that's it. So I just want to show you how easy is to use tabulate in case you might be needing that. Let's say we're approaching the break, yeah.
Well, yeah, we're going to do it 10 minutes early.
10 minutes early? Okay, sounds good. Let me just print out there the output so I can, and I think this is perfect timing. I was hoping to find the, yeah, let's use this one. So I have a sequence in my terminal. So let me clear this. I run the Python interpreter here. So let me create this sequence. I want to import from D&D roller. And by the way, I haven't added neither dice roller nor sequence rolls into the init.danda init file. So I need to have the full input in this particular case. Dice import sequence roll. Or maybe let me show you that the other way doesn't work. Import sequence, what's the name of the function exactly? Sequence rolls. as I told you, doesn't work because it could not be found in the dunder init package. But if you look into the dice module, it could be found. And so there you go. And then you can do print of sequence roles of sequence. There you go. This is how tabulate works. It's pretty convenient. And that's it. So I think the last thing I want to tell you before going into the packaging, unless you're not entirely interested, and then so I will skip that part, is essentially how do we test these things, and in particular, how do we test having random numbers generations. So we have to make tests a little bit unfair in order to be consistent in our tests. All right. So the very last thing I promised I wanted to tell you about the software before moving to the package, finally you might say at that point, is an extra excuse to tell you about how do you test with random numbers, because I think it's something that it might be, I'd say might, because it really depends on what you're doing, but it might be useful to you to know. And that's also something I had fun playing with while preparing the material. So moving on to the last sequence of tests for sequence roles, and just go and copy all the code I have here into a new file, and then I will make some comments about it. So again, we have a third test module called test_sequence_roles.py, and this is just containing the test for the sequence roles function. So again, it's a matter of how you decide to do things, but at the level we decided to do with this project, essentially the corresponding is one function, one Python test module, which seems quite a lot in terms of granularity because it's really different. But in the end, in every single Python module is really self-contained. And again, if the takeaway message is to do testing isolations, you want to test every single functionality, regardless of what's happening with the rest of your own software. That's perhaps a good pattern, or a good development pattern, or best practice. So the first thing we do here in the first test is very similar to what we've been doing in the previous test for dice roll. So we patch this time dice roll, and we make sure that when we call sequence rolls, the dice roll mock object is being called, so that we're absolutely sure we're not reinventing the wheel. And by the way, this idea of reinventing the wheel is I'd say particularly close to me because of what I've been doing in my previous life, during my PhD in particular. And I was working on a problem which was called clone detection. So like methods to identify duplications in big softwares. And even if this seems like very niche to you, just think of the functionality you might have, refactoring functionality you might have in code editors or advanced IDE. Like this piece of code, by the way, is very similar to something you've already written here. And so duplications in code are not always a good idea. And so you really want to get rid of them. And so this idea of making sure that you're not reinventing the wheel is essentially testing both. So it's testing that you're reusing the piece of software you already have, and so you did have a dependency, but you're testing this dependency in isolation. And the second bit is I'm not duplicating code in my code base, which generally is also a good bit. But that's for the first test. So again, I'm using patch from unit test, standard library. Here, there's not Pytest involved at all. It's just like unit test. The other thing now is like, what would you do if you have to make sure that since a sequence rolls is going to be calling dice rolls, and dice rolls by effect is what is calling roll, and ultimately the rand end from Python, you have the randomness there. And when you're testing with random, there's no way you can actually be consistent, you might think, because they're random. Well, indeed there is a way, and you have to remember that this is not real random. This is pseudo random number generators. And so there is indeed a way to control the randomness in your code. And this is obtained by random seed. So the random seed is that piece of information that you can set, and whenever you rerun the code with the same test of input multiple times, you're absolutely guaranteed that the output will be the same. So essentially, I called it unfair dice, in the sense that you're essentially generating an unfair sequence of numbers which are totally controlled. It would mean that you're essentially playing with a die you can control. Okay, I don't know how to say that in English. It's like you're cheating. Sorry? Loaded dice. Thank you very much. I was missing that. Thank you. You were playing with loaded dice, so you know exactly what's going on. And the way you do this is using seed on a specific number. And what we will be doing is we'll generating sequence with unfair dice, and then reusing in the test the same exact random seed in our test. We're absolutely guaranteed. In this case, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Which, by the way, is also a very good seed because of the binary representation of it. But that would open an entirely new chapter, which I'm not going to go into. And then essentially, we absolutely guarantee that when we do this, we're using the same random seed, and so any random number we generate is absolutely repeatable. This is what this test is doing. So I'm fixing a seed, I'm generating some rolling here in this unfair dice function. And so I'm calling randint here. And then refixing the seed in again. So the first fixing has been done internally in unfair dice. I'm doing this in the test code. And then I call the roll function. And so again, randint, I'm calling randint again. And you'll be absolutely guaranteed that you're generating again the same number, because you're restarting from the same starting point. Okay? So this is just to take away another an extra piece of information relating to testing with random numbers. And the rest of it is just testing that this is actually going to happen. So to finalize this bit, we run python -m, pytest -v, and we're all done. We have 26 tests passed, and test sequence rolls.py has been run as well. So we're absolutely sure that according to the test we developed, everything works fine. Nice. So we're done with the code development, and what we have achieved so far, and we can go back to the code terminal maybe, code editor. We have, let me close a little bit these files. We don't need them anymore. Nice. So this is our project structure. This is what it might look like on your end too. So we have a dnd_roller, which is the Python package we've been developing. This is the test folder, which is all the tests containing all the test modules. And the rest of it is just like the previous thing relating to the GitHub repository. So what we're missing now is we have to make this folder an actual software package. Okay? And to do that, we just need a couple of things more. Nothing particularly. The first thing we're going to do, and we move on to the third section of the document, so time to pack, is creating a special file which is called setup.py. Okay? So let's move on in creating the setup.py, and with this setup.py, we'll be using setuptools.setup function. Okay? So we create within the main folder here. Should we probably do here? There you go. It's setup.py. Nice. So from setup tools, we import setup and find package, which is the function we'll be using. So the setup function is a function that will be called whenever we want to install a package. And by the way, this is a general Python packaging information. This is how you do. And actually in the document, the reference you're going to find is pointing directly to the main official Python documentation. So we're not talking conda yet. We're not talking pip specifically yet. We're just talking general Python packaging. Python as a language is offering you a framework to prepare your software to be packaged, okay? The next bit for ourselves will be, let's use a tool that generates recipes that will be useful to install these packages on many, many different platforms. Okay, let me just copy this for the sake of time in the setup.file. You can do that as well if you want, and then we can comment what's going on. But it's pretty much straightforward. So, I hope at least, and if it's not, please let me know. So, well, the setup file is taking a series of metadata. And this is very important because we'll be using this in a second. We specify a name and a version, and those are the main two things you immediately specify. The name corresponds to how you want the package to be named when you pack everything, and the version is the version number. I'm not going to have the time to go into the how do you version your software, but there are documentations there, and if you look at the general official documentation of Python packaging, there are references for you to expand on this particular topic. Let's say that so far we have version 0.0.1, so we have a minor version. Actually, we have a patch of a minor version in this particular case, but it is what it is. It's fine. We can set our initial number as we like. I go for 0.0.1. Then you specify who are the authors or the single author. It really up to you. It could be the name and then the author email. This will be all package metadata that if you've published packages on PyPy in your during your work days, or you have experience with working with PyPy packages, these information will be published on the main page on PyPy directly. Okay, so these very information go there on PyPy. But they're also part of the metadata of the software package we're going to develop. Then we have a description, and that's a simple description. In this case, it's just a sentence, Python package to roll D&D dice in the terminal. And you can also have a long description. In this case, we're doing something which is standard practice when you have code into GitHub repository. We're reusing the README file. So on the top of this file, what I've done is essentially loading the README file into a long description Python variable. So I'm reading the file. I'm specifying in the metadata of setup that the long description content type is Markdown, because README is generally written in Markdown. Actually, it's a Markdown file. So that is the format you're expecting. And then you specify the URL of your project. So what is the home page of this project? Generally, this corresponds also to the GitHub repository where you're publishing the code. In this case, let me fix this. It's going to be my username /DND roller, as we've been creating in the very beginning of the workshop. What else? That's my email. That's actually a mail not existing. I think I made a mistake there, but that's fine. I will be fixing that now. It's anaconda.com. And then, yes, names could be, and all of you, because we've been working with this all together. And we include package data, true. Well, this is actually true, but we're not using it. This include package data is, yes, do you have a question? Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Well, that answer I don't know, but the thing is, let me show you what I've been doing with the emoji thing, the no-emoji package on PyPy. Oh yeah, the classifier actually is something I was going to talk about in a second. So let me keep this page here open. The PyPy, because I actually something I don't remember off the top of my head right now, and I'm checking with you. Is, sorry, there's no letter emoji here. No emoji, there you go. So if you go here, yeah, you do have an email here. That's the mail to link. Yeah, it's pushed there directly on there. You can use specific email for project if you're worried about spam. Yeah. That's actually a very good point. No, that's a very good point. And to be honest, a point I've never thought about it before. So thank you very much for your contribution. It's a very good point. There are ways in which, as far as I know, and you can correct me if I'm mistaken. You have sort of a alias you can specify for your emails. So like you can actually Apple as a service developed specifically for that. It's called Hi My Email. Is doing exactly that, isn't it? So it's creating alias for your emails so that your email is never showed up in clear, and you can avoid that. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. Or you can do, as I was doing, like putting fake emails. That's then never going to work. But I'm kidding. What I was going to say earlier was like we have an include package data here, and this include package data is specifically necessary when you have dependencies in your package that are not specific source files. So, for example, I happen to have packaged something that had HTML, CSS dependencies, were not Python dependencies. So you can include all of them into the package as resources of your package. Okay. This instruction here is necessary to instruct the setup function to look at your folder structure and in case exclude specific folders you don't want to make part of the software package you're building. And last but by no means least, the dependencies of your package. So in this particular case, we do require no emoji at that particular version, for example. We can drop the version if the version specification if that's not necessary. And tabulate, as we're doing for tabulate, for example. We say we need no emoji and tabulate. That should be fine as well. Good. Sure. I wouldn't. Because tests are there, and when you install it, you want to have tests in your Python package. Unless you have a very specific reason not to, but I cannot think of one at the moment. Oh, yes, please. At this particular step, we're not using Conda yet, and what we'll be doing, using Grayskull in a second, is actually leveraging on these information here to generate the recipe for you. So it's the opposite of what you're asking, if I understood correctly. So like you specify your dependency for a package that presumably we go on PyPy, and instead we will make it a Conda package out of it. So like it goes on a different place because on conda-forge, on Conda repositories. And Grayskull is essentially doing the job for you and writing all this thing manually. Is like reading the metadata from your specifications there and preparing the recipe for you. Yeah. Sure. That's a very good question. When we will be about to build the package, there will be default packages included in the environment, which are the very same defaults that you get when you create a new environment. So you don't have to specify them as the pip package you were mentioning. That will be part of the dependency for you already. What happens? Oh, sorry. Condo exclusive dependencies, you mean packages that will be downloaded from Conda rather than from PyPy? Yes, there is. And that was actually a part which is not in the tutorial, but in the break, I actually thought it could have been a good addition, and so I will be doing right now, so bear with me. One of the things that you can do in Condo environment, and this is probably one of the most important thing, one of the main reason, at least to my experience, of why you want to use Condo environments over other ways of creating environments, is that you can easily replicate and reproduce environment on different platforms, and this is one of the benefits of Conda. So I'm going to show you now in a new shell. So let me increase the font here. So let's go back into the conda info --ems, right? So I have a list of environment. I want to export this packaging environment, okay? The way to do this is to do conda env export. This will create, you have to name the environment you want, and that's going to be packaging. This is going to create a YAML file, which is similar to the pip requirements to generate, okay? So I'm going to show you now what's going on. This is the output, but most likely you want to save it into a file. So you do conda env export. Sorry, let me clear the shell here so you can see. Conda env export -n packaging, and then you redirect the output to an environment.yaml file. There are other options you might want to add, and this also brings me to another point. I don't remember exactly all the things, so let me go with help, otherwise I go, yes. So you can specify the channels you want, otherwise they will be automatically inferred. You can avoid putting the number of builds, and this is generally useful when you want to have portability between different platforms. So like, because build numbers might be very operating system specifics, so because especially when you have scientific packages dependencies like NumPy, this has always been my experience. If you go with build on Linux, it's not going to work on Mac because the build number is different, so you want to get rid of that if you really don't need them. And you might also say ignore channels, so that it goes by default by the channels you've set up as default on your environment, otherwise it goes into the packages you have. And in fact, we're going to avoid that. So we're going to avoid the number of builds here. You can also specify the file you want to write the export to without using the redirection there, using the -f option. So let me just do that. Conda, no builds. That was the option I couldn't remember. So clear, conda export -- no builds on environment.yaml. So if we open this file now, sorry, you're right. You're right. Let me do that again. I forgot the name of the environment I wanted. It goes on the current environment by default. Thank you. I didn't see that. Okay, so this YAML file is the file you need to recreate exactly the environment you had. As you can see immediately on the top, you can see my channel, because that is where one dependency has been taken. And how the channels actually work in Conda is like, you have a list of channels, you can specify as many as you like, and any package will be taken like using a name resolution order. So if one package can be found in one channel, like Valerio Maggio, that is the channel that will be used. Otherwise, it goes to the next in the list and go on until that package cannot be found anywhere. And the same applies if you're using conda-forge, for example. Okay, so or if you happen to be working with PyTorch, which is my experience, for example, you always want to install PyTorch. Well, not always, because now you can use default channels. But in the past, you wanted to specify the -PyTorch, the PyTorch channel to install things, and so PyTorch was at the top of the list, and PyTorch was installed from there. The rest of it was installed from conda-forge or Anaconda default packages, package channels. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, yes. That's why conda-forge actually exists. Um, and we've been discussing this in the break. Actually, you can do much more than that. You can actually force any specific package to be in a channel at a specific checksum. So even when you're installing packages, you want to check that you're actually. This is one of the extra bits provided by Conda, to be honest. Something like when you're getting packages from defaults in Anaconda channels, you're absolutely guaranteed that you're not getting rubbish. Because this is one of the things we do on maintaining the default channel. And the conda-forge is a similar effort, but it's a community effort. And that's why Dave will tell you later, and I already spoiled it a little bit, that conda-forge, being this important and these community-centered repositories for other packages, there is an approval process to have packages on conda-forge for exactly the same reason you were mentioning. Because you never know where you can get in from the internet, specifically from PyPy. There's been lots of examples. In my experience, because this is what my radar is going closer to, is in PyTorch specifically, if you're looking for packages, you have plenty of other similar named package that malicious packages. And there was at some point, and there was actually a piece of news which was particularly useful. The nightly build of PyTorch was on PyPy was tampered, and in fact, if you were installing it from Conda, you didn't have any problem. But if you install it from PyPy, you were installing malicious code, and that was quite an issue. Anyway, sorry for going away with things. Well, as you can see now, what the expert has been done is just telling me the package I had in my environment and the version, not the build version. So it's just like fixing the version. At this point, to my experience, and this is what I normally do, is like, if I have to share this file, do I really need to have a list of everything in my environment? If you share this file, you're absolutely guaranteed this will work, and I promise you it will. But if you really want to tell to someone what are the dependencies to your project, you can get rid of some of them, because some of these packages will be installed anyway, because they're a dependency of the Condo environment. So what I would normally do is like, okay, I've never installed any package called this or like this, so I just, Nomoji, yes, I do, and I keep this. So packaging, no. Pip, yes, pip is really necessary because I might need to install things from pip, so let's install pip. Pytest, I've installed, yes. Python, sure. Setup tools, it's default, let's keep it. Tabulate, yes. The rest of it, and I didn't. You can get rid of the prefix here, because you can. This prefix is used to say what is going to be the path of your environment. You can get rid of that, it's not necessary. And that's it. So this is your environment. Once you have this file, you can push it on the repository, as we will be doing, and you can recreate on your own computer using directly Conda the same environment using this specific version of the package. And the same rules applies to similar to the pip requirements file. So if you don't want to have this to be a strict dependency, but at least a minimum dependency, you can say, instead of nomoji equal to 0.0.5, you can say greater than or equal to 0.0.5. Same, it works the same way. Okay? Just a reminder that in pip, you use the double equal. In Condo, you use a single equal. That's the only difference. And in this particular case, we don't have any pip installed packages. But if you were, you would add an extra section here that is called pip, and then you have the list of packages installed from pip in this sublist. And in the result will be that when you recreate the environment, Conda packages will be installed first and pip dependencies later. And that's it. Yes, please. Sorry. Sure. No, no, no. If you had pip dependencies, conda and export would have added them. I can, for example, show you this very quickly on a different environment, like, let me see. ppml sift has a pip dependency for sure because I know that. So I'm going to export this one. ppml sift. And let me just print it. I don't save it. There you go. There you go. You have an extra section pip, and this list of packages that will be following the requirements.file standard, so the double equal there. And the export has gotten them directly from the environment. Okay? No worries. That being said, okay, we have the environment there. That's been said. We need to finish the packaging, yeah. Yeah, so we write some description to the project. I just copy here, so to make it super quick. So I'm going to copy this into the README file, so we have a proper longer description. So I replace the content here to this one. And if you're wondering, you can see preview of what we've been doing. This is how it looks like. Maybe tabulation is bad, but it should be good on GitHub. And this is what will be the longer description for our project. This markdown here. Last but not least, we have some configuration file to set up. This is again standard Python packaging. So we go for the setup.cfg and the pyproject.toml. Some of these could have been used. I decided to share both of them because some of these you can actually use directly pyproject.toml in case you don't want to. I just decided to show both because it's standard practice to have either one or both. It's the same thing. There's no particular rule there that applies, at least to my knowledge. So you create a new file, setup.cfg, and you copy them. The only thing I want to mention, I think, here is you can specify the license file, which is generally a good important bit because you want to license your software. And then you have a classifiers, and this is the extra metadata for package retrieval, specifically on PyPy. This is very useful. And the pyproject.toml is this one, is essentially replicating a few environments. The last thing this is what we need, pyproject.toml. Sorry, I missed the name. Toml here. Toml is this format that we've been using here. It's a metadata, it's a markup formatting here, where you have, we were specifying the same classifiers, the same instructions, sort of replicating the same information in different format. We're also replicating dependencies, again, emoji and tabulate. The reason why we're doing this is because both Conda, build, and Grayskull will be reading from different bits. That's why I'm doing this, but I will be showing you in a second. Nice. So at this point, this is how your project might look like. And feel free to tell me any questions in the meantime if you have them. So we've been doing this. This is the project we have. We have the code, the tests, the metadata, and the setup.py. We're actually ready to pack. So the last bit we need is to add everything on GitHub. So I will be doing something that I would normally never do, as in doing a git commit with everything in it. But just because I don't know, I don't know what is your practice. I would be more than happy to know what you do. My general way of controlling things in Git repositories is having very clear Git commit messages, and in particular they should be semantically related. So whenever you push something on a repository, you don't want to see something like, I've done this, and that in many different files from many different things. I do one commit at a time, because you don't pay commits, it's fine, and it's always good for you to track things back, and when you have to roll back changes, you can go very nitpicking the thing you need, but that's up to actually the practice you prefer to embark, I would say. But at this point, I git add everything, and then I git commit, say, release, ready to be packed. Sure. Good point. I actually would like to add it to the repository, because this is something you can automate your things with. In this particular case of packaging, it doesn't really make any difference. But if you're sharing your code with somebody and just want to say, okay, my project is actually on that repository with this code, and you want to add instruction to replicate your environment, or if you're working on an open source project, you have presumably a section how to contribute. And the first thing you do in contributing is setting up the environment, and that's how you do it. So you make that file living, environment.yaml, along with, so my general practice is I do both. I do environment.yaml and requirements.txt, depending if conda is urgently necessary or not. So if I support both, it's up to you, whichever you prefer. And these things are actually taken into account when with automated systems. So I'm working a lot with Jupyter Notebooks. So like having tutorials in Jupyter Notebooks for data science. And if you go with projects like, I don't know if you ever used it, by MyBinder, for example, which is a sort of a Docker generating a Jupyter server for you. It reads from the repository, and if it finds a file which is called environment.yaml, it understands that's a Condo environment, it sets up everything for you. Otherwise, it goes for requirements.file. If you couldn't find any of those, it goes for default environment, and if you have dependencies, then it's not going to work. Okay. But yeah, I should probably. I have no idea where that file is. Is it here? Yes, it's here. So let's move that file into this one. Let me cat environment to make sure it's the right one. Yes. So I git add everything, and I git commit -m, ready to pack. Okay. Everything is my environment. By the way, this is git ignore at its best. As you can see here, we have Pytest cache, but this is not part of the git commit, likely, because that has been ignored by git ignore. And this is the reason why you want to use templates, because this is standard things you don't want to add on your repository. That's it, I guess. We have to git push. So you push on your repository now. That has been done. Go back here, refresh. Wrong window. We should refresh this one. And there you go. We have everything. Nice. So, before actually doing the package, we want to create a release. And this release will be automatically used by the Grayskull conda recipe generator. So to do a release is actually pretty easy. So you go and releases here, create a new release of your software. You want to use a tag, and when you specify a tag, you want to use a version, because this is what will be visualized directly into, what did I say here to do? Oh, I say this after telling you what Grayskull is. So let me just not jump to conclusion. Let me follow the same mind path I had. I don't know how many of you recognize this picture. How many? I love you guys. Essentially, the reason why this is called Grayskull is because it's an open source reimplementation of a previous system which was called Conda-skeleton. And so they come up with Grayskull. I think it was genius. Anyway, Grayskull is an open source project that you can use to automatically generate for you a Condo recipe, starting either for a GitHub repository, which is hosting your project, and in particular a packaged version of a release of your project, or starting from a tab archive you can have of your local folder. So we've been demonstrating, and this is to answer a question I got in the very beginning, I can't remember from whom, asking, we just need to have necessarily GitHub? The answer was no. In alternative, you can pack everything in a tar.gz file, and you can use that as a reference for Grayskull. I'm not going to do that, but that's for your information. You can just use a local package instead of using a URL from GitHub. Okay, it's going to be the same thing. Anyway, before that, we have to have Grayskull installed on our machine. To do this, we just add Grayskull, which lives in conda-forge. So this time we do have an extra dependency, but it's not going to be a dependency for our package. It's a dependency for our building system, which is two different things. But we're still installing everything within the same package. We don't care at this point. So we go conda install. Oh, sorry. Let me just clear everything so you can see on top. Conda install -c conda-forge. So we're installing everything from conda-forge, Grayskull, and this specific version. The reason why we're specifying also this is because an incompatible version was installed. So I just wanted to make sure that everything is ready for us to work. So we install Grayskull first. It should be taking. Yes, there's just in the meantime. I think I know what's going on. What's going to happen is essentially now making resolutions for the names and things. And what this will require, since we're switching to installing packages from conda-forge, conda-forge will require to update some certificates package. And this is the exact package containing the checksums of all the packages that you have in the channels, which will be referenced when you have to check that you're installing actually genuine package from there. By the way, this is downloading everything. That's why it's taking so long. Because if you remember, I've done something that wasn't actually in the path, which was conda clean my cache. So it's actually downloading everything now. And on a conference Wi-Fi, probably that wasn't a good idea. But fingers crossed, it will be working pretty soon. Yes. So you're essentially seeing the effect of cleaning the cache, so you have to install everything from scratch. Okay, everything has been done. Installing. And that's it. Yay. So now we are creating the release for our software. So I go back to where I was. So I just go back again so to show you what I've been doing. I click on create new release after having pushed everything. So just make sure that everything is on the repository now. You create a new release. You create a new tag, which is called has the name of the version you want, because this will be the version that Grayskull will think your software will have. Let's say, create a new tag. Target main, so the main branch we're taking as reference. DND roller open 0.1. Description DND nice roller v open 0.1. Nice. We publish it, and that's it. So the effect of doing this is GitHub is creating for us these two archives. And so these archives are exactly plus some metadata here on a specific GitHub commit checksum, and versioning. So at this point, what we want to do is using Grayskull to generate a new recipe. So we move away from the first thing the tutorial is telling you to do is to move away from the root folder. So because Grayskull will create a recipe that is called as your package that shouldn't be living in the root folder of your project. So we just have to get away from there. And in particular, we're telling you, like, move away in the parent folder, if you like, and then create a new Grayskull folder. It can be any folder you like. It doesn't have to be Grayskull. And we're moving into this folder as well. So this is where we're living now. Something, something, something / Grayskull. Okay? And now we create the recipe. To do that, we just, let me copy this one, and then adjust it. So this is going to be my repository. Yes, so Grayskull, PyPy, and the URL of GitHub repository. This is going on the GitHub repository, checking the release, getting the latest one, and generating, with all the metadata and the source code found in the archive, a file which will be named meta.yaml, which is going to be the actual recipe for our Condo project. As you can see, it's downloading. The dependency, tabulate, has been found, has been reading the pyproject.toml. Everything is fine. No emoji has a red missing dependency because of this maintainer. Okay. Something I want to try now is to see whether I could perhaps, I don't know, let me check that. The help here of Grayskull. Grayskull essentially, as Mahe was telling you in the beginning, is able to generate recipe either for Python packages or R packages. And so this is the meaning of passing PyPy in the beginning. If you were going to create package for R, you would have said cran, right? Because that's the reference package providers. And that's the only options you have here on Grayskull. So there is no way you can specify at this point in Grayskull. That was my guess, actually, but I just wanted to be sure. Grayskull has generated a recipe for us. So if we look at what's inside this folder, there's a D&D roller folder. Within this folder, we have meta.yaml, which is the recipe. Let's have a look at this. Nice. So this is the actual recipe that Conda build will read and use to install your package. The reason why we're using The reason why we're using Grayskull is because we don't have to write this manually. Otherwise, you're very welcome to write it manually, or similarly, you're very welcome to update it manually if Grayskull has something missing into that. So we might quickly understand the format here. You're setting the name of the version of this package, and so this variable will be used later on. In particular, in the package section, you have a name of the version. Then you have a source, and this source is pointing to a specific tag, which is, by the way, the version. That's why we call it v0.0.1 on GitHub, and with a specific checksum here, so we're absolutely sure we're getting that one. There's a section specifying what are the instructions to build it. In this particular case, we have no specific architecture for a package, so it's going to be no arc, which means every single platform we're going to do. The command to run to build is Python, so the Python that you have in your environment, -m pip install dot, which is the current folder, -v to have some verbosity. And then you have requirements. So you have Python, setup tools, and pip, and other external dependencies like nomoji and tabulate. And then you have tests as well, and these tests will be run and used to make sure that everything works. Okay, so you have the import test in the ND roller, you have the pip check test, and the requirement test. Metadata, the about section, will be taken from this URL, the license file is here within the package, and recipe maintainer is this one, this guy here, because there's that dependency on the channel we had. Nice. So at this point, we have the recipe. We just have to build the package using this recipe. To do that, we can first off install conda build in our own environment, because we need conda build. Conda build. Fingers crossed this will be quick. Yes. I need to download a bit of packages. Okay. Was quite quick. There you go. And now we can build our package. In this case, we are trying to specify the channel we need for the extra dependency, because we're building this package with that channel dependency. Pardon, I'm in the wrong folder. I need to be in the Grayskull folder, because it was actually looking for a folder named as the name of the package, and that's why Grayskull is calling that folder as the in that way. So you have to be, let me clear this one. You have to be in this Grayskull folder, and within this folder you have the DND roller folder containing the metadata, meta.yaml recipe. So we do conda build again. This time should be working. I think you do, but I'm not entirely sure, to be totally fair. If you do, it shouldn't be doing any harm, but when I tested this, the YAML wasn't there, so I'm not sure. It might be not necessary now, but I'm not sure. So what it's doing right now is actually building a package. So it's going to be local, and it will be telling you where that package lives in a second. As soon as this is done. But essentially it's telling you already now here. So, okay, let it finish. Nice. Successfully installed. Now it's running testing to make sure that everything is done. So the package has been built. Test is being run now. Import check, pip check, no broken requirements found. That was good. We have the package. There we go. We have the package done. And the package is actually living in this folder. So yada dada / miniconda, whatever, / conda-bld. It should be similar to on your end. And within that, there's a subfolder depending on the architecture you were building for. In this case, we have no arc. And then you have a tar.bz2 file, and that's the package we just built from using conda build. This is a local package, and if you scroll down there, it tells you, by the way, to have conda build upload to anaconda.org automatically, use conda config -set anaconda upload yes. Or you just do anaconda upload and the package that you want. Okay? So, if I now do this, and you can do that if you like, on your end. So I copy this path. I do anaconda upload, entrusting myself remembering the password, which might be really not the case. So this is what it's doing. So I'm actually trying to upload. Actually not going to do that because I'm pretty sure I don't remember the password. I probably do. No, that's PyPy. No, I don't remember the password. That's fine. Anyway, this is the command you want to run to upload on your own channel, the package. So if I do that, I will be uploading that on my Valerio Maggio channel as well. And so there will be a D&D roller package there that you can install from. If you want to do that live right now, you're very welcome to do so. So if everything goes well, a D&D roller .tar.bz, actually BZ2, not GZ, GZ here, should be created into conda prefix / conda build, no arc, blah, blah, blah. And this is the Windows version. And now, I think it's time for Dave to get the stage and telling you a little bit more about conda-forge. In the meantime, do you have any question as soon as Dave is getting ready for his part? Yes, please. We have two. Can you go, please? That's a very good question. So the Condo environment is a Python virtual environment, meaning is a collection of packages living in a sandbox together. Oh, sorry for messing the setup up. The Conda package is actually a single package that you can have within a virtual environment. Virtual environment could be Conda environment if you're using Conda to prepare everything, or they can be virtual env virtual environments, PyEnv virtual environments. You have all the alternatives. We've been seeing Conda virtual environments. That's a Conda package, the whole thing. But what I put on GitHub as environment.yaml was the file you can use to recreate the same environment, same Conda environment I was having while I was developing the project. Meaning, if you're willing to contribute to this fantastic D&D roller project, you might want to set up my own environment so that you're absolutely sure that you're working with the same version of packages I was working to make everything working on the project. And at the same time, you're not polluting anything you have on your computer because you're just making everything living in their own sandbox, and that just for the purpose of working with D&D roller. No worries, thank you. We had another one? Pardon? Yes, has to, yeah. I think must be public because otherwise, I don't think there is any way for you to provide credentials there, at least to the best of my knowledge. But, exactly, if you don't want to have that at all, you just bypass GitHub completely and you pack your project as a tar gz file and you do Grayskull, PyPy, your package.tar.gz, same thing. Essentially, the GitHub bits is just to automatically download these packages. Oh, sorry, you're not seeing there anymore, but it's just to download the packages from GitHub automatically. That's it. That's a good question. To my experience, no. Well, yes, but the location of this environment doesn't live within the source code unless you really want to, because you can do that. You can specify the path of your Conda environment. So the default one is Conda prefix /ems, and they all live there. So in fact, if you, I'm not showing, but if you do Conda info -ems, you will see that the prefix of everything is always the same. It's always conda prefix /ems / whatever. Yes. To my experience, that's the case. Yes, yes. I just want to tell you that something we've been working on, and that would be game changer, is, and we'll be working that for the Anaconda notebook we've been having. I don't know if you know that, but Anaconda has a notebook online service you can use. We've been working on, it's still ongoing, but we've been working on having dependencies within environments so that you can have child environments from parent environments, which means that some packages may be reused from other environments, so you don't have to install them. And the reason why we're doing this is to save space, because as you've seen, when you download a lot of packages, it's a good bit that you have isolations, and so you have your own version with the same thing, but when the versions are exactly the same, you're not downloading the packages multiple times, but you're having Python packages replicated, the same Python packages replicated multiple times. And when you are limited in space, in cloud storage space, for example, you don't want to do that. And so we're trying to see if there's any way to do that. Can proceed? I think I've told you everything I know. I don't know any more than that. Thank you.
Stephen, I'm going to be using this mic, so. Okay. So we have 24 minutes left, okay? And I want to discuss a couple things, and since we have 24 minutes left, I'm going to discuss them in a particular way. First, I'm going to talk about how you can publish your package now that you have it created, Conda-compatible package. And then secondly, I'm going to talk about the Conda ecosystem and community, okay? And then if we have time, we'll throw it open to questions and answers. Hey, I'm live. We also have several other people in the room who are savvy on Conda. So, okay, so if you look at the HackMD, there are two sections at the end. One is submitting to conda-forge, time allowing, and the other is publishing in your own channel, time allowing. Okay. Now, Valerio talked about this a little bit, the second option here. Both of these are slightly different from what we've covered before. So the tutorial above this covers a lot of things that were out there on the net, but not in a necessarily coherent form. These two sections are based on documentation that's out there that's in a coherent form, and it's pretty good, actually. So today I'm not going to step you through these hands-on because the documentation that's out there is pretty good, okay? I do recommend you take a look at this. I've added some comments to the tutorial, but yeah, so we're not going to do a step-by-step, but I'm going to talk about it at a high level. Anybody objecting? Okay, you people have the power, remember that. Okay, so yeah, conda-forge is step-by-step instructions. So conda-forge is the largest public channel out there. It has over 20,000 packages on it. It has over 3 billion, that's with a B, package downloads per year. Okay, so conda-forge is widely used and wildly popular. So if your goal is to have your package become visible and easily installable to the world, you want to publish on conda-forge. Okay, and there's a process from their website, again, fairly well described, and here's how you would use it for our particular example today. And you basically make a copy of the staged recipes repo. You then add your recipe, which we just created. Then add that to your copy of that repo, and then you submit a pull request. And a couple other things. Yeah, you probably want to change your GitHub ID there if you haven't. Okay, great. And thanks to the magic of Grayskull, we already have a SHA-256. And thanks to the magic of Valerio, we already have test cases, okay? So they do have standards at conda-forge, and they want you to conform to them. So it then has a checklist after you've done their step-by-step instructions. It tells you, okay, what do we need here? And it says, okay, make sure you've got a license valid. Okay, I looked at the SPDX. We're using MIT, which is actually in that list. So we're good there. Ensure that you have included a license file in your license. If your license requires one, most do. I have no idea, okay, if MIT requires us to recopy the license at the top level. So I went looking in conda-forge and I found this recent thing that was merged, and it was an MIT license and it didn't recreate the license file. So you don't have to if it's an MIT license. But I don't know where to find this information. I just want to be clear on that. Maybe others in the room do. It's about having to duplicate your license, which sounds bad because, as Valerio mentioned, duplicating things is not how you want to do it. Okay, a bunch of things are already done because we use Grayskull, and we're good. Okay, and then you commit, you push, and you file a request. When you submit the pull request, because you have forked this from conda-forge, you're submitting a pull request to the stage recipes repo. There is a long template here about what it involves. And the top part is about notifying the Python team for us, okay, that, hey, can you take a look at this? And there are directions on how to do that. It's a little bit complicated because of how GitHub works. So if this is your first submission, you have to do one thing, whereas if it's your second submission, you do a second thing that's much easier. Okay, we apologize for that. And then there's a checklist. And you want to walk through this checklist and make sure, yeah, okay, this is all good. No, we're not including any static libraries, for instance. All sorts of things. So you want to actually check these things, X them off as you go, and then you want to create pull requests. So you're going to submit it, okay? So you've got your package, you put it into you put it into your copy of stage recipes, you then submitted a pull request to the conda-forge organization. Now, conda-forge is an entirely voluntary organization, and they are busy because conda-forge is the place to be, okay? So you as a package submitter, you want it right now because you just did this really cool thing about rolling D&D dice, and you want it out there for the world to see. But conda-forge is swimming in requests, and so it's going to take them a while. And so you now enter this dance where you think, okay, have I waited long enough to ping them again? Because sometimes you do have to ping them again. Sometimes they don't get to it unless you ping them again. And so my personal recommendation is wait a week. Try and wait 7 days. If you haven't got stuff in 7 days, you can ping them in GitHub. You can also ping them on their Matrix channel and say, hey, I submitted this a week ago. Can somebody look at it? Do your best to be as polite as possible. Okay, absolutely as polite as possible. Again, these are all volunteers. Okay, they do this because they want to help the community actually do stuff and share stuff. Okay, so that's my advice for conda-forge. Yeah, and Valerio mentioned some of this. Here's what happens once it actually gets published in conda-forge. Yeah, and so they'll use an internal tool called conda-smithy, and that's that. Okay. Any questions about publishing in conda-forge? Yes?
So you said that there's some standards that we kind of have to meet. What would be like maybe the most difficult one that takes the most time? Like you showed maybe testing was important?
Yes, yeah. So people will often submit things without a license. That's not difficult, it's just tedious. Testing, I don't know if testing counts as difficult, but it certainly is tedious, Let's see, I don't know. The conda-forge, so does anybody in the back row have an idea on what conda-forge usually throws back on feedback? Because they often do. Anybody know? None of us work on conda-forge, so we're not the volunteers helping the world. Okay, yes. Right. Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry I can't answer. Thank you for answering. Okay. We're good. Thank you, Stephen. I'll try and repeat the question. Okay. So the second thing is publishing in your own channel. So if your goal is not to make it visible to the world, if your goal is to make it visible to a certain number of people, and maybe make it public and maybe make it private, okay, but you want your coworkers in Australia to be able to use it, you can create your own Conda channel on anaconda.org, and it's dead easy. Okay, I did this last night. I've done it twice now. I have 2 channels. I don't know, I was going to do it today and have 3. It's really easy to do. And then you have to install the Anaconda client, the Anaconda client, and then you just push it. And then lo and behold, you have a channel and people can see it and they can use it. It's -C, Lario Maggio. Sorry for your last name. I pronounced it wrong. Okay. So this is really easy. And once you have created the channel, you can say, I want this to be private, which means it's restricted use. Or you can say it's public, which is the default. Okay. There are lots of other channels out there. conda-forge, again, is the big one. There's also BioConda if you work in life sciences. BioConda has about 8,000 packages on it. NVIDIA has its own. I think IBM has its own. I think Intel has its own. There's a bunch of channels out there. So, okay. Okay, good. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to go to the presentation. You're not supposed to see the thanks yet. Ignore that. Nobody saw that. Okay, good. And let's present. Let's see what happens here. Okay, no smoke. Good. Okay. So my role in Conda is I'm the community manager. Although you don't manage the Conda community. There's 35 million people. Okay, 35 million users. So keep that in mind when you publish the conda-forge. You're potentially reaching 35 million people. And you're making it easy for them to install stuff. Okay. So I'm the community manager, and in that role, I've taken on a bunch of stuff. A bunch of stuff happened before I started, okay? This is an indication of what's going on in Conda, let's see, in the big picture, okay? So in 2021, so I've only been there 16 months, so keep that in mind, but in 2021, the core Conda engine became open source in practice as well as in name. So it's been open source in name the whole time. It's 10 years old, whole time. But say 4 or 5 years ago, if you submitted a pull request, we might act on it, we might not. And now if you submit a pull request, we know it's there, and we are acting on it, okay? And that changed as of 2 years ago. Second thing that happened, Code of Conduct last year was formalized. This is not, so this may not seem a big thing, but it's actually huge. You can't have a functioning community without a prominent code of conduct and one that gets enforced. And this sounds really weird, but we're really proud we got our first case last year. Why are we proud? It means people care, okay? If you're in a community that doesn't care, you can have all the code of conduct stuff you want. It doesn't help. But in Conda, people actually care. So we are trying to establish this open, friendly, welcoming community, okay? In 2022, the governance was changed, and it now encourages, it always encouraged participation from individuals, but it now encourages community and corporate contributions, okay? So a thing with open source is how do you get companies to contribute without just taking, okay? And so we have re-implemented our governance policies so that we actually encourage corporate community contributions. So you have a voice at the table. Okay, so equally important, we have limited the impact of corporate contributions. So even if you're Anaconda, which is where I work, you have a limited impact now. It's in the governance. So Anaconda has a limited impact on decision-making within the Conda community now. And that's hard-coded in the governance. Before that wasn't true, and Anaconda made most of the decisions, okay? So big changes in the Conda community. These are driven in part by Anaconda. I mean, I was hired by Anaconda to make this happen. So we're really, really committed to the open source ethos. Last thing on this slide, this year we became a NUM-focused fiscally sponsored project, which means we had to actually prove all this stuff, okay? And so we are now officially an open source project with NumFocus, which is a great organization. I recommend looking at it for your open source projects. Okay. Second thing from the community, there are lots of places to gather. So after we leave this room in 10 minutes, well, we're all here, first of all, but there are a number of places that you can actually get help and you can get information. So we launched a discourse Q&A forum last year at conda.discourse.group. We consolidated chat. We had chat everywhere, everywhere, and now we have it in one place on Matrix, okay? And it's the second URL, which is really heinous. I apologize for that. And then 2023, this is almost here. We thought it would be here by PyCon, but it's not quite there. We're going to have the conda.org community website. And so if you want community news, what are releases? There's a ton of products in the Conda ecosystem, just a ton. Okay, not just the Conda core engine that we talked about today. There's also Grayskull, which came from the community. There is Mamba. There's just a bunch of stuff out there, okay? So our goal is to have that be the place to go for information. It's the hub, okay? And what else? Conda's also at PyCon. So here's a couple more things that are happening. If you're going to the packaging summit, there's a talk by Giannis, who was here earlier, about Conda and PyPA. And then Bianca has a talk on Saturday about Pluggy and using Pluggy in mature products like Conda. We have an open space meetup. So if you want to talk about Conda, we'll have an open space meetup on Saturday after Bianca's talk. That'll last for an hour, although you don't have to stay for the whole hour. And then on Monday and Tuesday, we're here for 2 days of sprints, okay? So I know there will be at least several people from Anaconda at that. So that's where we are. And then many thanks to Valerio. So Valerio started his day yesterday in Europe at PyCon DE, where he presented as well. And today he's here. He was here bright and early. Amen, yes, really impressive. So Mahe and Bianca, who prepared the opening, sorry, I'm stuttering. I stutter and I'm hard of hearing. I'm really good at my job. Okay. Ken and Giannis and Steve, who are all in, well, yeah, Giannis is left, but they're all in the back row. They came to help and answer questions, which they have been, so thank you so much. I'd like to thank Amr. Are you still here? Okay, he's the one who made sure that you're in the right room, okay? Stephen, our AV person in back, thank you so much, Stephen. Amen. Yeah, so nothing went wrong. And you don't, yeah, it's great. Okay, and finally you guys, because it's 12:22 and you're still here, okay? And almost all of you are still here, which is really impressive for a hands-on tutorial. So kudos to you, okay? And I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. One last thing. If this tutorial changed your life, okay? Yeah, exactly. There's a conference about packaging, and it's not just about the Python packaging ecosystem, it's about everything. So on Linux, it's about all languages, it's about language independence. So it's in Berlin in October. It's 2 days of conference and 1 day of sprints. Think about attending this, and that's it for me. We have 7 minutes for questions generally. And keep in mind, we have 4 experts back there and 1 here. Yes, oh my God, you have a question.
No, I just one thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank you, because of you, we have this opportunity to have you here. Because you had the idea, you proposed to us, we gladly accepted, so thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah. Okay, 6 minutes for questions, anything. Shoot.
So, Condo's kind of magic for me because it gives me trusted software that my company will let me use because it comes in from a sort of known walled garden of Conda, not conda-forge, Conda specifically, and it gives me magical dependency resolution.
Yes.
And that's the bit that I'm actually most interested in. So, in the example we've just got, say I'm a dungeon master, I've built my own stuff, I decide that I'm going to use this D&D roller, I locally have, what was it, no-moji 0.0.6. We've got a conflict. I can't use this because the requirements are it has to be exactly 5. This is a really simple example, but the environment we've got has got flipping hundreds of requirements, and you get dependency conflict so easily. What do I do?
Okay, does anybody want to take that? I mean, I could, but I'd be bold. Bianca? So, sorry, what was the first part of the question? You're not going to answer it? You can make it up. Come on. Okay. Do you want to repeat the first part of the question?
Okay, so Conda's magic to me because it gives me trusted versioning from Condo, not conda-forge, where as working for a big company, I can say, I trust this stuff, I'll let people have it, I'll build it into my own distributions. And it gives me dependency resolution magic that I don't quite understand, that lets me build increasingly complicated projects with dependencies that mostly work. But the dependency, like I've spent days of hell on this when dependencies don't work out. So as a really, really simple example, the roller class uses Nomoji 0.0.5 exactly, no flexibility whatsoever. Say I locally use Nomoji 0.0.6, I try and use this project, I've got a conflict. Like in that scenario specifically, and then more broadly for dependency resolution, what do I do?
She does have the answer. Yeah. I knew you did, Bianca.
I don't know if this is specifically going to answer your question, but this is something that happens a lot when everybody or when you install everything into your base environment. It gets more and more and more complicated the more things that you install. So that's why you have a separate environment where you have just Nomoji, the specific version that you need, and then everything should work. I don't know if that answers your question, but so you're saying that you can't have that version at all on your computer anywhere.
So I manage the Python distribution for a company. Okay. And someone will come up to me and say, hey, there's this package I really, really, really want. Can I have it? And I'll go, I love you developers. Yeah, I'll try and give it to you. I'll put it into my Condo pipeline, and it'll say, oh, you've got hard-coded 7 dependencies which are all broken by trying to pull in this new thing. Like, this was a super simple example, and I'm just picking on
Right.
hard-coded dependencies.
Yeah, so I can.
Is it a transitive dependency that you're talking about? You've got a package A that depends. It can be.
So I'm going to tell you something you already know, which is this is a really hard problem. Because when you write the recipe, you could either say, okay, I'm going to make a prediction about the future, which I have no idea.
Maybe they'll be backwards compatible.
Right, maybe it won't. And so you're faced with, I can state this fact, which I know is true, or I can say anything greater than or equal to what this is. Valerio, you have a, okay, he's stretching. Yes, you've earned it.
This makes my users really, really unhappy.
Yeah.
They've installed it locally on their machine. They said yes to every dependency upgrade that happened, and it worked. I try and do it in my Condo pipeline, which has got hard-coded.
Yeah.
For good reasons.
Yes.
And I tell them maybe half a day, maybe 2 weeks, maybe more. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know that there's a great solution. I have a, sorry?
You're at the mercy of the open source community, I think, in a way. Yeah.
So Steve is one of the packagers at Anaconda. So listen to whatever Steve says.
Oh. You say, yeah.
It's reassuring that
We
it's
deal
not
with that
just me.
we deal with that all the time too. It's a waiting game sometimes. Yeah.
I've had that issue finding a flexible install and usually creating a new environment because sometimes you install a lot of packages in one environment, many packages that you don't need.
So my specific situation is I have quite a complex environment, but that's the environment I have to support. So it's not the base has become polluted. It's not that I can create a new clean thing and do it there. I have to do the complex thing.
So we have 1 minute left. Yes, you have another intractable question? That's excellent. Okay.
Just to first say, Anaconda and the Conda product is really good, Let's say an example, I'm using it for an enterprise client, and how could I get an enterprise support, I don't want to depend on the community support, like posting on the forum, because, if everything is down for some reason, we need somebody. If you take any other products, you get an enterprise support. Is there any timeline or anything on the roadmap getting us that enterprise support as well?
Okay. So KP, So KP, if I understand the question, I think you should talk to the booth. Okay, so no, it's not intractable at all. I think it's very tractable. But if you want enterprise support, you're going to need to pay for it. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so talk to the people at the booth, which will be sort of me at some point, but okay. And we are officially out of time. However, the rest of us are here all week for the rest of the week, you know? So find us, think about it. Thanks to the row, Bianca, Valerio, and thanks to you all. Okay.